All right. If a listener can't remember a single thing that you've said 24 hours after you've been on a podcast, you didn't leave an impression. You left a gap, and someone else is going to close that gap and potentially close that client. So let's talk about it. Today, we're going to talk about why playing small, safe, however you want to call it, on podcasts, it's actually more expensive than making the mistake of saying something that you later regret. My name is Carolee Moore, and I'm the founder of the Podcast Pitching Society and the host of the Currency of Visibility podcast. And I've closed nearly $100,000 in contracts just from podcast guesting alone, not by saying something that everyone will agree with. And it's just like, yeah, you're awesome. But by saying sometimes the things that people might think, but don't want to say out loud, or maybe they don't even have the proof or the numbers to back it up. So let's get into it. First of all, I want to remind everyone, masterclass on March 4th. We're going to get into everything that I talk about. This is the third day of this series, why your podcast appearances aren't making you money. It's in preparation for the masterclass, which is podcast placements that pay. You can catch the theme. If you're doing this thing and it's not making you any kind of money, you're not seeing an ROI that's even leading to leads, even if it's not leading to like an automatic money situation, you need help. Don't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. So you definitely want to get into the room for the masterclass, not just be in the room, but ask questions. This situation where we're going to talk today, you're going to listen to me, hopefully take some notes, and then try to apply something. Whereas the masterclass, you can ask questions. We will go back and forth. I will coach you live on the call. That is very different from what we're doing here today. And so I want to make sure that if you are looking for more in-depth help, know that that's available to you. That link is going to be in the comments or in the description for this live itself. Now, let's get into the 3 points for today. You already know how it is, get in, get out. Unless I go on one of my rants, it is what it is. Okay, so point number one in this whole situation, I want to also preface this conversation as I typically do by simply saying that your voice, when you are in any kind of space where you are considered an expert, the reason you are there is not to be like agreeable necessarily. And unfortunately, we are taught in corporate to be agreeable. I was just speaking to one of my clients earlier. We were doing a strategy/preparation session because she was new. We're booking her on podcasts, but there is a way that she's trying to shift how she talks about what she does. She was doing B2C, now she's doing B2B. And because of that shift, she was not sure how to say what she wanted to say for this new audience. And because it's B2B, there is a tendency to get almost robotic in that, like, I have to stay in this box because if I don't sound ultra corporate, then they're not going to hire me. Meanwhile, these corporations are hiring people with personalities. Why? They want people who are going to keep their folks awake. You go to this training, and we've all been there. Well, maybe not all, but if you've worked in a corporation before that had professional development trainings, you've been in them trainings where you're like, is there going to be food? Because that's what I'm there for. This is absolutely terribly boring, but at least there's food, right? You don't want to be one of them trainers. You want to show immediately, I have a personality, I have a perspective, and that is super important. So that leads me to the first point, which is safe answers are not going to be the way that you want to go about your interview. You want to make sure that you are rememberable. That's not a word, but we're going to make it a word for this context, okay? Essentially, safe answers are often forgettable answers. It's actually a perfect example because now we're heading into the midterms with politics, right? Imagine you're watching a politician and they're being asked straight up, what are your thoughts on a particular splitting issue, meaning an issue where there are two clear sides? how annoyed, especially if you are one person on either one of these sides, how annoyed would you be with that politician if they tried to play the middle, which a lot of politicians try to do, right? They don't want to offend anybody. And so they're trying to play the middle. You then lose respect. They probably lose your support. You're going to be looking for the candidate who is unashamed, unabashed. Hey, I stand on this side and here is why, right? I believe this and here is why. I don't believe this and here is why. So if you're expecting that of public figures and people, that you're really wanting to kind of help your life be better, think about that on the flip side, where you're the person who is now speaking to your potential client or your potential audience member, meaning if you're B2B and you're looking to really engage a decision maker, how is it that you're going to essentially give these cookie cutter, boring, played out, I've heard it all before, Sunshine Anderson, if you get that reference, we friends, answers, and then expect floodgates to open and leads coming and all? No. If you're boring me to tears on a podcast, I might skip you, right? There's a reason why folks like Mel Robbins gets invited to different areas to speak. Not only is she speaking from a place of expertise, and she has the science to back up a lot of the things that she talks about, and she will in a minute tell you, hey, this is from this study that was done by this particular person from Harvard, from wherever. But she's known to drop an F-bomb every now and then. She's also known to unequivocally say, this is where I stand or I land on this particular issue. Fight me kind of deal. Like, she comes with the energy of like, this is what I believe. So your safe answers, the ones that you think are allowing you to be in different spaces. And this is really timely, I would say, for people of color and women in this environment where you believe saying something might actually get you barred from opportunities, etc. I'm of the belief, and you can take it or leave it, that I would not want to be in a place or get paid by anybody who my authentic self is an affront to. If who I am and how I operate and how I speak and what is a problem for you, even though credential wise, I got it, degrees, certification, if I'm fitting all of those things, but you just don't like the way that I speak or how I present, then why would I want to work with you anyways? Be gone. Bye. Someone else, there's another opportunity that is going to be a better fit. And so instead of having a scarcity mindset around it, and I'm going to be honest, that's what it is. In a lot of ways, we get scared of losing that opportunity. If you really put so much weight on one opportunity, meaning you get on this podcast and instead of just being not only yourself, but like saying what you really feel, you lose an opportunity to shift conversations. You lose an opportunity to get people to truly understand and know you for you. You lose that. I'll give you an example from a client of ours, and she's actually became a friend as well. She works in the healthcare innovation space, and a lot of the podcasts that we got her on, she was talking to people who were in the healthcare space, but also there are folks that were not, or whatever the case may be. And she worked as an administrator in the hospital system, and she could have easily not talked about her experience there and just talk about now the innovations that they were working on within her new company and the tech that they're working on and all the amazing things that they were doing. But she wanted to make a point of saying, I actually was responsible for some of like unfortunate things that probably happened to Black and brown people within the healthcare system, because I was just like a cog in that machine. And eventually I was one of the top people making the machine work the way that it did, until I realized like, this is actually like harming people who look like me. And that's a problem for me. Right. And I need to figure out how to fix and change that. If the story didn't start with, and we talked about this yesterday, this idea of friction, that friction point is where the memorable stories come from. The friction of like, man, I was kind of Lex Luthor in this joint. Sorry. It is what it is. My references are, they're special. It's okay. So if you realize, man, I was this way, right? I was burning myself out. I was doing all the things. And then boom, something happened. Some friction came and I shifted. The answer that you give to the questions of like, you know, what was that or whatever the case is, you can make it cute. You can make it so that your life looks like, you know, a bunch of just highlight reels and nothing ever like bad ever happened to you or whatever the case is. But man, listen, when you cut to it and you can really say like, I was selfish. What happens in those moments when you're able to self-own or call out your industry in a way, you give other people the freedom to start seeing themselves like, oh man, am I a little selfish? Like, 'cause I just did that same thing. Like, oh, I just had that same experience. Man, I never looked at it that way. By being open and honest and not giving the cookie cutter, you know, answers, you're able to free other people from their own boxes of like, I have to say it this way, or I can't show that. Ooh, this got to be over here. This is not for public, right? If you're able to be and this is not for everybody, right? If you're listening to this and that's not what you're wanting to do, then I'm going to say this with love. I'm going to hold your hand while I say this. You're not wanting to be a thought leader for real. You want to be famous. You might want to be well known. You don't want to be a thought leader. A thought leader is they're going to be at the forefront of everything and taking all the lumps from everybody. They're going to be talked about badly. They're going to be, stripped. Thinking about anyone who dared to go against the grain during their time. It's really sad, but typically they're hated during their lifetime. It's not until they die in maybe a decade, several decades, a century later, when it's like, wow, this person was amazing. Look what they did. They were saying this back then. And now we can see that they were right. But during the time, honey, the way that we have now decided to remember MLK is very different from how he was being treated while he was alive and even directly right after he died, right? MLK at the time was not considered this like peaceful Gandhi-like figure to most of America. And we know what I say, most of America, what I mean. Okay. Now he's this figure that both sides, no matter what political side you're on, tries to use for like whatever. And that's just what it is. But if you go back and listen to his speeches and some of the things that he wrote, it's very clear he was not playing it safe with how he showed up. And so I want you to remember that as you're playing it safe and not trying to say the quiet parts out loud and trying to self-edit yourself, someone else, and again, this only matters if you're wanting to be a thought leader, if you're wanting your perspective to be truly impactful to the folks that you feel called to serve and to help and to pull out of whatever they're doing. This is only for those people. If you chilling, by all means, chill. Whoever I'm talking to, you hear me and you can see me when I say this. Whatever it is that is holding you back from truly being yourself fully and authentically in the spaces where you might not be the majority, in the spaces where it feels uncomfortable, that's where you have to push yourself to simply just be. Essentially, whenever you feel that friction, I want you to challenge yourself to just do it anyways. Because I promise you on the other side of like, oh, Well, they're talking about me. Okay. Right. And over time, you realize like it's worth it. The one little troll is worth you getting to 50,000 people who needed you. It's okay. The faceless bot. Say whatever you want to say. I'm good. Point number 2. You don't have to be controversial. You have to have a conviction. And this is super important because I'm not telling you to go on these podcasts or anywhere and like spew hate speech or say something that is going to bring harm to someone else, right? I'm saying, and I mentioned this yesterday as well, maybe it was the first day. For most of you that are listening, that are a part of my audience, you're a service provider and you got into service to solve a problem. You saw some kind of a gap in the market. You saw some kind of gap in service that you decided, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to offer this specific thing to make sure that the folks that are in need of this solution know, hey, there is something for you. And if that is the case, then when you are speaking on a podcast, I need to feel that you care about the people that you serve more than anything else. The hot takes that you'll have, the people say you speak in highlights or whatever, cool. But one thing that you can't really manufacture that much is passion, genuine care. People can feel that. And only psychopaths or the sociopaths can like try to fake that. Most people will not. If you don't care about something deeply, it's going to be super obvious that you just don't, right? If what you do is something that you care deeply about, then when you go on these podcasts, the nerves should be dissipated after the first 5 minutes, not even, because at the end of the day, when you remember, I'm not necessarily here to impress the host, even though that's a byproduct. I'm speaking directly to the person who's listening to this podcast right now. And that this person needs me. This person needs my service. And if I don't speak to them in their language in a way where they can truly understand, I am absolutely dropping, everything right now. I'm failing at what I'm supposed to do. And so when you go on these podcasts, remember that your goal is to show not only that you know things, but that you feel things, that you feel the pain, you feel the things of like, man, I understand what it feels like to feel overlooked. I understand what it feels like to feel undervalued. I understand what it feels like to have heard a certain message over and over for so long that eventually it became your own voice in your head saying those messages. No one else was saying it. You were saying it to yourself. And so when I speak to my audience, I speak from a place of empathy. And so as I'm talking on a podcast, if I'm talking to you, you're going to hear me different than someone else who you're not called to speak and work with that particular audience the way that I am. And even if you are, I am going to ensure that when they hear me, it's clear that I not only know who they are, but what their real hang up is. What's their real challenge? Their real challenge is not visibility per se. Okay? When you strip it down, it gets to, as we talked about yesterday, a human to human connection. When you strip it down, I've been working in corporate for 20 years. And for majority of that, I had been in the same position or maybe got promoted once, maybe twice. I've trained my replacement. I've seen my replacement come from a different company and is asking me questions about how to do certain things. I've been punished and told I can't go out and speak. These are all real things from real clients, right? I can't go out and speak and do professional speaking and talk about the work that I've done, my experience, none of that. I'm not allowed to do that because my supervisor is a hater, frankly, and doesn't have the same skills in public speaking. And because her boss is now sniffing around and is excited about the possibility of me representing the company in more ways, that was cut off. So now that I am in my own world, I'm untethered in corporate, it's still on me. I'm now self-editing myself because I've been edited for so long. That is very different from people can't find me on LinkedIn. Because when I can tap into what's really going on with someone, when I can tap into what their real block is, the story becomes easier to tell. There is a better connection between them and whatever it is that they're sharing with their audience. And their personalities come out a lot more, whether it's podcasting, just regular content on social media, their pitching, their sales, everything unlocks for them once we actually work on the root. Then visibility, instead of being this boogeyman, becomes an opportunity for them to now flex this new freedom of voice. That is the work that I do. That is work that I'm passionate about. That is the work that I get like super, super like jazzed about when I'm talking about it on a podcast, because I've done enough work, research, conversation, an internal like excavation of my own stuff and my own story, so that when I speak, it's not from a place of guessing. And so therefore, and this is one of the things that my coach actually said that I think is really important for you to remember too. A lot of times our nerves come from a lack of skill or a lack of preparation. Typically, when we have done something enough times, we no longer have the nerves there because the reps make us so that we feel prepared. We understand and know what may or may not happen in that situation. We're able to flow because we know. When you are operating from a place of, right, not only fear, but like not knowing, it's harder to be confident. And so kind of thinking through, how do you speak from a place of conviction over and over and over? You have to be convicted. You have to actually want to do what you're doing and like to do what you're doing. And there are plenty of people who are not in love with what they're doing, and I understand it. Some people are doing some stuff for just the paycheck, and it is what it is. But I'm speaking to the folks who like genuinely you feel called to do what you're doing. Speak from that place always. Because I promise you, from that conviction comes the contracts, comes the knocking on the door for speaking, panels, all the things. I'm living that now. This has been something I've seen for other folks. Because, and I always say this, the first person that you have to sell on your service is you. And so the first person that you have to sell on your story is you. Once you get that conviction, then you don't have to be controversial, but you're going to stand on business, period. And it might sound jarring, or not jarring, but like, oh, I've never heard this thing expressed this way before. Tell me more. That's what you're gunning for and aiming for. Because how many times have I heard the exact same principles said over and over and over again from principles that were mentioned in the 1940s, 1930s, 1920s. I was reading a book called Psycho-Cybernetics, and through that book, which is from the early 20th century, right, I realized there's so many people. Tony Robbins is one of the main ones that took a lot of the concepts from that book and just reimagined it, right? And created their own frameworks with the same foundational principles there. And if you listen close enough, it's the same stuff, but they've just found a way to make people say, oh, I've never heard it said this way before. And that's really what you're aiming for, because there's really not much that's new under the sun, right? You're not trying to recreate anything. Your goal is to package it, position it in a way where it's never been done in that way before. So, last thing, your goal isn't to be liked, it is to be remembered. Now, this is harder, I think, for women. And the reason why it's harder for women is because we are socialized, in my opinion, to be amiable and to be likable and to not ruffle feathers, especially U.S. Southern women. I've noticed, because I wasn't, first of all, I wasn't born in the U.S., but I also wasn't raised in the South. I was raised in the Northeast in Boston by an extremely strong mother. And by strong, I mean, I don't remember seeing her cry. So my understanding of femininity was not that women cried. I didn't start crying openly until I was in my 20s, like later 20s. And so for me, a little different, but what I saw around me and what I absolutely see a lot of now, because I live in Texas, is that for the most part, women are kind of told to present a certain way in order to be congenial and liked. And this is going to be, listen, okay, I'm just going to be honest, okay? I am going to do what I'm telling y'all to do in real time. I believe that in a lot of ways, we have decided that femininity means to be soft and high-pitched voice and wearing floral and almost like literal wallflower that you won't notice if you just walk by. And feminism is where you're essentially a dude. And I just don't subscribe to either one of those. I believe that being a woman, there is a strength that is being a woman that is still grounded and rooted in femininity. And it is uniquely feminine to be powerful. It just looks different than a man's power. And that is okay, because that is how we were created, right? But as a woman, you don't need to perform femininity to make other people comfortable. You don't have to agree just to make someone else comfortable. Especially if you're in an industry that is predominantly male, your voice is that much more powerful when you say, hey, nah, not today. It's actually, that's jacked up. Actually, our entire industry has been doing it ass backwards for the last 10, 15 years. And here's how I know that, right? One of our clients, one of our earliest clients came from the super, super male dominated industry, mechanical engineering, I want to say. And she worked in like the construction piece of things. Yeah, we'll just go with that. Why not? I'm trying to remember exactly what the industry is. We'll figure it out. But her whole thing, like stories that she told me, it's just like she was not mentored. And the advice that she was given by men typically kind of, it was almost like go along to get along and you'll get up to the top, which is not true. And not true in any industry, but certainly not true in a predominantly like 90 something percent predominantly male industry. And that's something that it took her a really long time to figure out. And eventually she found her voice of like, this is BS. Like, this is not okay. And actually, the mentorship structure in all of this is the reason why there aren't a lot of women in leadership. There's a reason why a lot of women tend to leave and go somewhere else and do all the things. And she just decided, I'm going to now create an army. I'm going to create this space where we're going to intentionally empower women who are in these male-dominated fields to find sponsors, to find mentors, to find resources, to get upskilled, to understand how to negotiate for their salary so they're not being paid half of what their less qualified counterpart is making, right? She decided to do that. But in order to even build that up and for it to be a thing, guess what she had to do? She had to speak truth to power. And that's not going to make you be liked. There are going to be people who are like, all right, shut up already. Like, why are you talking about this? Or just flat out like, no, that's not true. And so many people, and I was one of them, it's like terrified of someone coming to you and be like, that's not true. That's not true. Here's the thing, and this is really important, right? If you were coming on here as a fakester, hoaxer, you know what I mean, someone who learned all they knew from ChatGPT, that's one thing. But you're not. You know what you're talking about because you've either lived it, you've helped other people through it, you have research on it, you've done enough of your own, right, market research. You understand your area super well. And that's what you need to stand on, right? That's what you need to stand on. And so even when people don't like you, they might say all the things, but you have the facts and the numbers and all the things behind you. So whatever. So when you go on a podcast, when you go in any kind of public thing where you are expected to speak, if you are interested in being a thought leader, there are going to be times where you're going to have to say some things that will piss some people off, that will make some people uncomfortable, especially if you're a woman or a person of color. And it is going to be your decision whether you capitulate or you stand up and straighten your spine and you say that thing like full throat. It's a decision, right? It is absolutely a decision. And I want you to think about, who do you want to be in your space, right? It's not just about being hidden or being highly visible. Because, and I'll close with this because it's very important, integrity. There are a lot of you who are listening to this right now, whether you're listening to this live or after it's been recorded, that you care so much about not saying something that's wrong, quote unquote, incorrect. You don't want to say anything that is going to make someone have to come after you for whatever, because, you know, you got real licenses to protect and all of that. Super true, which is why I'm saying, you know your stuff before you speak. But I want you to understand that at the end of the day, if you can sleep at night because you know that you have literally used the platform that you have for the betterment of the people that you're being called to serve. That's all that matters. So whether you have 5 people listening to you and following you, or you have 5 million, the same integrity stands. And a lot of people are not ready. Not their business, them. They're not ready for 5 million eyeballs on them. Because that weight, if you're not 10 toes down, fully mentally like locked into who you are and what you actually bring to the table and all the things, that might crush you. Which is why for the podcast, The Currency of Visibility, before we started talking about strategies, the next thing that's coming up, one of the episodes, I'm talking to someone who built their multi-7-figure business off of TikTok. We'll talk about all those like amazing things and strategies and blah, blah. Before we got to any of that, the first couple of episodes, I spoke specifically and almost solely about the internal work. Who do you become first to then manage and handle what you get? Because a lot of people are asking for stuff that you ain't ready. And that's something I had to tell myself. I had to recognize and realize, sis, you're saying you want this thing. There's 2 things. You're saying you want this thing and, you're ready for more. You're ready for more. You're ready for more. But just a little trickle, honey. And you already complaining. You're already complaining. And you haven't even gotten the full weight. Ma'am, what are you talking about? You're not ready. You're not ready. And the other piece of this, mentally, where it's like when there are more eyes on you and more expectations that you're feeling to be a certain way, how confident are you that you're going to stay consistent with who you are and not shift and try to become who you think they think you are? So highly, highly, highly recommend that you focus on the story that you're telling yourself first. Get super clear on what you believe, why you believe it. Gather that information so that when you speak, you're speaking from a place of authority and you're speaking from a place of confidence, and confidence that is built on repetition, confidence that is built on like true understanding and knowledge, so that people can actually hear the passion that's coming out of your mouth. They can hear your heart speak as you're speaking. And no matter where you're at, over time, someone hears your voice, they're like, oh, that's Carolee. Because they know the cadence, they know whatever it is, my random like side quest that I be taking as I'm talking, references, all the things that make me, they know that. Same thing for Mel Robbins, you'll know because she talks about her stories all the time. You pick up on that. And then she also swears like a sailor. So you pick up on that. Like all of those things makes you who you are. And then that's when the visibility, more people, more pressure, more all the things will not crush you. Will not crush you. It's important. Okay. Homework. I want you to finish this sentence right now. Everyone in my industry says blank, but I believe blank. Drop it in the comments. I want to see what, and again, think about this. What is everyone in your industry saying, right? But what do you believe? Right now, everyone in my industry is saying that social media marketing, right, content creation, all the things is like the way to grow your business. And I'm saying, nah. I understand it, and obviously I respect people who have done it. Like I know personally people who are making millions from social media. Get it. Totally get it. I don't like social media, and I don't want to build a life or a business where that is the main place that I go to make my money. I don't want to do it. And I knew that when I started my business, the second one, And so I created something, ironically, a business helping other people who have the same, like, I don't want to do it, move away from that. And when I talk on podcasts, when I speak on stages, all the things, my biggest point is you should try something else. Try podcast guesting, because it's actually the best way to build trust as an expert instead of solely focusing on social media. Not saying social media is the devil or don't use it or whatever, just not centering it. And that's my entire kind of MO here. What is yours? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear from you. So now, tomorrow we're going to talk about who you're actually talking to during your interviews. And this is really important because I mentioned earlier that one of our clients was having trouble switching from B2C to B2B, and the messaging behind that, how to actually craft and create that. We're going to go a little bit deeper into that tomorrow, so you don't want to miss that. And like I said, there is a masterclass on the 4th, next Wednesday. It's a week from now. We're going to go super deep into all of these concepts. You do not want to miss that. It is free $99, but you will get an opportunity to ask me questions, to get live, actual hot seat coaching about your business or your brand. Not in theory, not in generalities, because right now I'm speaking in generalities, obviously, for a wider audience. If you have specific questions around how do I actually take the stories, which is what we talked about yesterday, and craft it in a way where it sounds already from the beginning like something that someone hasn't heard several times or a lot of times before, especially if you're in an industry that is oversaturated. Hello, I'm a marketer, like, throw a rock, there's another one. How do you do that? We're going to go over all of that. So I'm really, really hoping I see you in the room. The link to register is in the description for this event, and I'll put it in the comments as well. And I will see you tomorrow for our next session of this live. Bye.